$5 million. That's my final offer, Miss Morgan. Take it now, or I promise you by tomorrow morning your daughter won't have a mother to come home to. Jessica's hands trembled as she stood on the crumbling porch of her grandmother's farmhouse, facing the man in the expensive suit who had just threatened her life in front of her 8-year-old child. Behind her, Emma clutched her leg, the little girl's fingers digging into her mother's jeans. Victor Chambers smiled, but his eyes were ice. 40 years, he said. 40 years my family has waited to get what's under this dirt. Your crazy grandmother couldn't stop us, and neither will you. Before we continue with Jessica's story, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and follow her journey to the very end. Drop a comment below telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. 72 hours earlier, Jessica Morgan's life had been falling apart in a cramped Detroit apartment that smelled of mold and broken dreams. She stood at the kitchen counter, hands shaking as she read the eviction notice for the third time, hoping the words would somehow change. They didn't. You have 7 days to vacate the premises. 7 days. She had $11 in her checking account, maxed credit cards, and a daughter who still believed that Santa Claus was real and that Mommy could fix anything. The phone rang. Jessica almost didn't answer. Bill collectors had a way of calling at the worst moments, their cheerful voices asking about payment plans while her world crumbled around her. But something made her pick up. Miss Jessica Morgan. The voice was professional, distant. I'm calling from the law offices of Henderson and Associates in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I regret to inform you that your grandmother, Eleanor Morgan, passed away 3 days ago. Jessica's breath caught. Grandmother, a woman she'd met exactly twice in her 32 years. A woman her mother had refused to discuss, answering every question with the same tight-lipped response. She made her choices. We made ours. Miss Morgan, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. Your grandmother left you her entire estate. 80 acres of farmland and a residence in rural Oklahoma. You'll need to come sign the paperwork to take possession. Jessica laughed. It came out harsh, almost hysterical. An estate. Her grandmother had left her an estate. The woman who had never sent a birthday card, never called, never acknowledged that Jessica existed, had left her everything. Is it worth anything? The question felt crass, but Jessica was past caring about propriety. She had 7 days to find a miracle. The lawyer paused. The land has been assessed at approximately $40,000. However, I should warn you, Miss Morgan, there's been interest from a mining company. They've made offers before. Your grandmother always refused. Why another pause? I couldn't say. Eleanor was a private woman, but she was very specific in her will. The land goes to you and only you, and she included a personal letter to be delivered upon your arrival. Jessica hung up the phone and stared at the eviction notice in her hand. $40,000. It wasn't enough to save them. Not really, not with the medical bills from Emma's emergency room visit last month, the back rent, the utilities that were already threatening disconnection. But it was something. It was a chance. Mommy. Emma stood in the doorway, her favorite stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. The rabbit was missing an eye, the fur worn thin from years of love. Jessica had sewn it back together 4 times now, each repair a little more desperate than the last. Hey, baby, what are you doing up? I heard you talking. Emma's eyes were too old for her face, too knowing. She'd learned to read her mother's moods the way other children learn to read books. Are we in trouble again? Jessica knelt down, pulling her daughter close. No, sweetheart. Actually, I think something good might have happened. How would you feel about taking a trip? Emma's face scrunched with suspicion. A trip where Oklahoma, to see a house that belonged to your great-grandmother. The one who died? Yes, baby, the one who died. Emma considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice weighing a constitutional matter. Will there be horses? Despite everything, Jessica smiled. I don't know. Maybe. Okay. Emma nodded, decision made. But I'm bringing Mr. Buttons. Of course you are. They drove through the night, sits Jessica's ancient Honda Civic protesting every mile. The check engine light had been on for 6 months. The heat worked intermittently. The passenger window wouldn't roll up all the way, letting in a constant whistle of cold air that Emma had learned to sleep through. 14 hours. Jessica counted them in coffee stops and bathroom breaks, in the slow crawl of miles that took them further and further from everything they knew. She'd left the eviction notice taped to the apartment door. There was nothing left there worth fighting for anyway. As the sun rose over Oklahoma, painting the flat landscape in shades of gold and rust, Jessica felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was a dangerous thing, hope. It had betrayed her before. When she'd married David, she'd hoped for a partner. She'd gotten a man who gambled away their savings and disappeared when she was 6 months pregnant. When she'd worked double shifts at the diner, she'd hoped to get ahead. She'd gotten carpal tunnel and a boss who stared at her chest. When Emma was born, she'd hoped motherhood would come naturally. Instead, she'd gotten postpartum depression and the crushing weight of responsibility for a tiny life she wasn't sure she could sustain. But here, driving through the Oklahoma dawn with her daughter asleep beside her, Jessica allowed herself to hope one more time. The farmhouse came into view just after 9 in the morning. Jessica's hope died quietly without fanfare. The house was a disaster. Paint peeled from every surface. The porch sagged dangerously in the middle. Windows were clouded with decades of grime, and the front door hung slightly open as if the house itself had given up trying to keep the world out. Behind it, a barn had collapsed entirely, nothing left but a skeleton of rotted beams. To the right stood a small outbuilding, maybe a chicken coop leaning at an angle that defied physics. Mommy Emma had woken up pressing her face against the window. Is that it? Jessica couldn't find words. She'd driven 14 hours for this. She'd allowed herself to believe just for a moment that something good was finally happening. And now she sat in her dying car staring at a house that looked like it was waiting to fall down and take her last shred of dignity with it. Emma's small hand found hers. "We can fix it, Mom." Jessica turned to look at her daughter. Emma was staring at the house with an expression of fierce determination, the same expression she wore when facing down bullies twice her size or struggling through homework problems solids that were too advanced for her grade. "It just needs some love," Emma continued. "That's what you always say, right? Everything broken just needs some love." Jessica's throat tightened. "Yeah, baby, that's what I always say." "Then we can fix it, you and me, out of the mouths of babes." The front door opened with a groan that echoed through the empty rooms. Inside dust lay thick over everything undisturbed by human touch for what looked like years. A calendar on the wall showed March 1987. Dishes sat in the sink crusted with ancient residue. A coffee cup rested on the counter, the dregs long since dried to a black stain. It was like stepping into a time capsule. Like Eleanor Morgan had simply stopped one day, frozen mid-motion, and never resumed. "Mommy, look." Emma pointed at the floor. Jessica's blood ran cold. Footprints. Fresh footprints in the dust leading from the front door through the living room and toward the back of the house. Someone had been here. Recently. "Emma, stay close to me." They followed the prints through the kitchen, past a closed door that might have been a basement, and out the back. From there, they led straight to the chicken coop. Jessica stared at the ramshackle building, her heart pounding. Who had been here? Why? What could possibly be worth investigating in this abandoned wreck of a property? "Should we go see?" Emma asked. "No." Jessica pulled her daughter back. "Not until we know more about what's going on." That night, they made camp in the least decrepit room of the house, sleeping bags laid out on the floor in front of a fireplace that Jessica had managed to coax into life. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls and the wind howled through gaps in the boards, but they were warm and dry and for the moment safe. Emma fell asleep, clutching Mr. Buttons, her breathing slow and even. Jessica lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through calculations that never quite added up. Even if she could sell this place, it would take months. Buyers for properties like this didn't exactly line up around the block. And in the meantime, there was no money for food, for gas, for the 1,000 small expenses that accumulated into impossible mountains of debt. A knock at the door made her bolt upright. She checked her phone. 2:47 a.m. Who would be knocking on the door of an abandoned farmhouse in the middle of rural Oklahoma at nearly 3 in the morning? The knock came again, louder. Jessica grabbed the only weapon she could find, a heavy iron poker from the fireplace set, and crept toward the door. Through the grimy window, she could make out a figure on the porch. Tall, broad shoulders, and holding something that glinted in the moonlight. A shotgun. Every instinct screamed at her to grab Emma and run. But where into the Oklahoma wilderness at 3 in the morning with a 7-year-old and no supplies? The voice that came through the door was gruff, but not threatening. "Saw your lights earlier. Don't mean to scare you, ma'am, but you need to know something. You've got visitors coming. And they ain't friendly." Jessica's hand trembled on the doorknob. "Who are you?" Name's Frank Matthews. Lived about 5 miles east of here for going on 40 years. Was a friend of Eleanor's insofar as that woman had friends. I've been keeping an eye on this place since she passed. And I'm telling you now, you need to be real careful about who you trust. Against every instinct, Jessica opened the door. Frank Matthews was older than she'd expected, maybe late 60s, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that had seen too much. The shotgun rested easily in the crook of his arm, pointing at the ground. "You're Eleanor's granddaughter." It wasn't a question. "You look just like her back when she was young. Before everything went wrong." "What went wrong?" Frank's jaw tightened. "That's a long story, and I don't know how much of it I'm supposed to tell, but you need to understand something." This land ain't what it looks like. And there are people who've wanted it for a very long time. People who don't take no for an answer. What do you mean your grandmother spent 40 years guarding this place? 40 years alone in this falling down house, refusing every offer, every threat, every bribe. She could have lived anywhere, could have been comfortable. Instead, she chose this. He gestured at the decaying property. You need to ask yourself why. Maybe she was just stubborn. Frank laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, she was stubborn all right. Stubborn enough to face down lawyers and corporation men, and probably worse. Stubborn enough to die alone rather than give up what she was protecting. He met Jessica's eyes, but she had her reasons. And pretty soon you're going to need to decide if those reasons matter to you too. What reasons? What is she protecting? Frank was quiet for a long moment. There's a mining company called Southwest Resource. They've been sniffing around this property since the 1980s, taking soil samples, making offers. Your grandmother turned them all down year after year, never explained why, never had to explain. It was her land. He leaned closer. But now it's your land, and they'll be coming for you next. Probably already know you're here. They got people watching. Always watching. A chill ran down Jessica's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. What do they want? Frank's eyes flicked toward the chicken coop, then back. That's the question, ain't it? What's so valuable about 80 acres of worthless Oklahoma dirt that a mining company's been circling it like vultures for 40 years? He stepped back, shotgun settling more firmly in his arms. You find the answer to that, you'll understand why your grandmother lived the way she did, and why you need to be very, very careful about what you do next. He was halfway to his truck when Jessica called after him. Wait, why are you helping me? Frank paused, his silhouette dark against the star-filled sky. Because Eleanor asked me to, years ago. Said if anything ever happened to her, I should look out for whoever came after. Make sure they understood what they were getting into. He opened his truck door. I'm honoring a promise to a dead woman, Miss Morgan. What you do with the information is up to you. Then he was gone, taillights disappearing into the darkness. Jessica stood on the porch for a long time, staring at the chicken coop. Morning came gray and cold, the sky heavy with clouds, that threatened rain that never fell. Jessica had barely slept. Her mind kept circling back to Frank's words, to the footprints in the dust, to the mining company that had been watching this property for decades. What was under this land, and did she really want to know? Emma was already awake when Jessica came back inside, sitting cross-legged on her sleeping bag with an expression of intense concentration. Mommy, I found something. Jessica's heart stuttered. Found what Emma held up, an old photograph, dust-covered and faded. I was looking at the pictures on the wall, and this one fell down. And look what was behind it. Behind the photograph was a small key, brass and tarnished with age, taped to the back of the frame. Jessica took it carefully, turning it over in her hands. A key to what I don't know. Emma's eyes were bright with the thrill of mystery. But Great-Grandma hid it right. So it must be important. The key was small, meant for a lockbox or perhaps a diary. Jessica's mind raced through the possibilities. Somewhere in this house there was a lock that matched this key. Somewhere Eleanor Morgan had hidden something she wanted kept secret. Help me look, Jessica said. They searched the house together, mother and daughter, opening drawers and checking behind furniture and peering into closets that hadn't been touched in decades. The place was a mess of accumulated years-old newspapers and empty canning jars and clothes that had gone out of style before Jessica was born. In the study, a small room at the back of the house, Emma found the desk. It was old oak, heavy and solid, covered in the same layer of dust as everything else. But when Emma ran her hands along the side, she found something the dust had hidden. Mommy, there's a crack here, like a secret drawer. Jessica knelt beside her, feeling along the molding. Her fingers found a slight protrusion, pressed it. With a soft click, a hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a leather journal yellowed with age, and on the front, in faded gold lettering, were the initials E.M. Eleanor Morgan. Jessica opened it with trembling hands. The first entry was dated June 12, 1962. David found it today. God help us all. David found it. Jessica turned the pages, her heart pounding. The journal told a story she could never have imagined, a story of a young geologist named David Morgan, Jessica's grandfather, who had been sent to survey this land for a company called Midwest Energy. A story of what he'd found beneath the soil, a discovery so valuable that it had changed everything. A story of uranium. The deposit is larger than anything we've imagined Eleanor had written in July of 1962. David says it could be worth millions, hundreds of millions, enough to change our lives forever. But then, the entries grew darker. A man came today. Joseph Whitehorse. Osage. He brought documents I'd never seen. Proof that this land was stolen from his people in 1921. Murder, fraud, all of it buried for decades. And now we're living on top of their bones. Jessica read on her hands, shaking. We can't keep this. David doesn't understand. He says we own it legally, that the past is the past. But I've seen the photographs. Children, families, all of them killed or displaced so white men could take their land. I can't build a fortune on that foundation. The entries chronicled a moral crisis that had consumed Eleanor's marriage. David wanted the wealth. Eleanor wanted justice. And in between them stood Joseph Whitehorse, waiting patiently for them to decide. The final entry from 1962 was stained with what might have been tears. David went back for more, even after we agreed, even after we promised. He went back and Joseph caught him. I don't know exactly what happened. I only know that David is dead, buried under the old oak tree, and Joseph helped me hide the truth. He could have turned me in, could have blamed me. Instead, he said we were bound together, now his people and mine, bound by blood and stolen land and a fortune neither of us could touch. I made my choice tonight. I will stay. I will guard this land until someone comes who can do what I cannot, who can return it to those it was taken from. I will stand watch, however long it takes. Jessica sat back, her mind reeling. Her grandmother had spent 40 years guarding a uranium deposit worth hundreds of millions of dollars, guarding it not to profit from it, but to ensure it could never be exploited, guarding the secret of a stolen land and a buried body and a justice that had been denied for generations. And now that burden had passed to her. Mommy, Emma's voice was small, worried. Why are you crying? Jessica hadn't realized she was. She pulled Emma close, burying her face in her daughter's hair. This moment, this was the pivot point, the place where everything changed. I'm okay, baby. I just learned something important about great-grandma. Was she a good person? Jessica thought about the question. About Eleanor alone in this house for 40 years, refusing wealth, refusing comfort, refusing everything except the promise she'd made to a dead man and a displaced people. Yes, she finally said. I think she was a very good person. She just had to make some very hard choices. The sound of engines broke the moment. Through the window, Jessica saw vehicles approaching. Not one, but three. Black SUVs with tinted windows, moving in formation like predators closing in on prey. Frank's warning echoed in her mind. They'll be coming for you. She had minutes, maybe less. Emma, I need you to take this journal and hide it. Hide it somewhere safe, somewhere no one would think to look. Can you do that for me? Emma nodded, her face pale but determined. Where Jessica's eyes fell on the chicken coop through the window. The footprints. Whoever had been here before had gone there, but they hadn't found what they were looking for. That meant there were hiding places they'd missed. Go out the back, to the chicken coop. There's a loose board, remember? You showed me yesterday. Hide it there, and then hide yourself. Don't come out until I come get you, or until Mr. Frank comes. Do you understand? Emma was already moving the journal clutched to her chest. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby. Now go. Emma disappeared out the back door just as the first SUV rolled to a stop in front of the house. A man emerged. Expensive suit, professional smile, eyes like a shark's dead and calculating. Miss Morgan, I presume. His voice was silk over steel. My name is Howard Jenkins. I represent Southwest Resource Extraction, and I believe we have a great deal to discuss. Jessica stood her ground, though her heart was racing. I don't have anything to discuss with you. Oh, but you do. Jenkins stepped closer, his smile never wavering. You see, we've been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Your grandmother was a stubborn woman. Admirably stubborn in a way. But stubborn people eventually die, and when they do, someone else inherits their stubbornness. He tilted his head, studying her. The question is, Miss Morgan, are you as stubborn as Eleanor was, or are you smart enough to take the money and walk away? What money? Jenkins reached into his jacket, withdrew a checkbook. $250,000. Right now? Today. You sign over the property, and you and your daughter can start fresh somewhere warm, somewhere without ghosts. Jessica thought of the journal now hidden with Emma, of the uranium deposit worth hundreds of millions, of her grandmother standing alone against this company for 40 years. No. Jenkins's smile flickered. Excuse me? I said no. This is my land. I'm not selling. For a moment, something ugly flashed behind Jenkins's professional mask. Then the smile returned, colder than before. I see stubbornness runs in the family. Very well. But I should warn you, Miss Morgan, my employers are not patient people, and this part of Oklahoma can be very dangerous for a woman alone. He glanced toward the back of the house, and Jessica's blood ran cold, especially a woman with a young daughter. "If you touch my daughter, I'll kill you." The words came out flat, certain. Not a threat, a promise. Jenkins's eyebrows rose. Such passion. Your grandmother had the same fire, you know, right up until the end. He turned to leave, then paused. You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, the offer drops to 100,000. And after that, he smiled, and this time there was no pretense of friendliness. Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. The SUVs pulled away, leaving Jessica standing on the porch, trembling with rage and fear. She waited until they were out of sight, then ran for the chicken coop. Emma was huddled in the corner, the journal clutched to her chest, her eyes huge in the dim light. Are they gone? Jessica gathered her daughter in her arms. Yes, baby, they're gone. But I don't think they'll stay gone for long. What do we do? Jessica thought of Frank Matthews and his shotgun, of the journal and its revelations, of the uranium deposit beneath their feet and the company that would do anything to get it. We fight, she said. We fight for what's right. Emma nodded, her small jaw setting with determination that mirrored her mother's. Okay, Mommy, we can do that. We can fix it, Jessica murmured half to herself. What? Something you said when we first got here about the house, that we could fix it. Emma smiled just a little. We can fix anything if we're together. That's what you always say. Yeah? Jessica pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. That's what I always say. Outside, the Oklahoma wind howled across the fields, carrying with it the weight of 40 years of secrets, a fortune in buried uranium, and the ghosts of everyone who had ever loved or lost or fought over this small patch of earth. The battle for the Morgan farm had begun. The sun had barely risen when Frank Matthews' truck came barreling down the dirt road, throwing up clouds of dust that hung in the still morning air like smoke from a battlefield. Jessica had been awake all night, reading and rereading Eleanor's journal by candlelight, while Emma slept fitfully beside her. Every creak of the old house made her jump. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. She had the fireplace poker within arm's reach, though she knew it would be useless against men like Jenkins and whatever resources Southwest Resource could bring to bear. Frank didn't bother knocking. He pushed through the front door with the urgency of a man who had seen something that couldn't wait. They're coming back, he said. Saw their vehicles staging about 2 miles out. 6 of them this time, not 3, and they brought heavy equipment. Jessica's stomach dropped. What kind of equipment? The kind you use for drilling. Core samples. They're planning to prove what's under this land, whether you give them permission or not. Can they do that? Frank's jaw tightened. Legally, no. But these people don't much care about legal. They've got judges in their pockets, politicians on their payroll. By the time you could file an injunction, they'd already have what they need. Emma appeared in the doorway, Mr. Buttons clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. Mommy, what's happening? Jessica crossed to her daughter, kneeling down to her level. Remember what I told you last night about great-grandma protecting something important? Emma nodded. Well, some bad people want to take it, and we need to stop them. How? That's what we're figuring out. Frank was already at the window, scanning the horizon. There's something else you need to know, he said without turning around. Something Eleanor never told anyone except me, and that was only because she needed someone to know in case something happened to her. What Frank turned to face her. His expression was haunted. The uranium deposit isn't the only thing buried on this property. Your grandfather's here too. David Morgan. Under the old oak tree about 200 yards behind the house. Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. She'd read about it in the journal, but hearing it spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real. I know. I found Eleanor's journal. Then you know what happened. How he died. Frank's voice was heavy with the weight of secrets kept too long. What you might not know is that there's evidence. Physical evidence. Documents, photographs, recordings. Eleanor gathered it all over the years. Proof of the original land theft. Proof of the Osage murders. Proof of Southwest's involvement going back decades. Where is it hidden? Frank moved to the fireplace, running his hand along the mantel until he found what he was looking for. A small catch invisible unless you knew exactly where to press. Same place as before. A section of the wall swung open, revealing a space behind the stones. Inside was a metal lockbox, military green, with the initials EM stamped on the lid. She made me promise to show you this if you ever came. Said you'd need it if you were going to finish what she started. Jessica took the box with trembling hands. It was heavy, far heavier than its size suggested. What's inside everything? Letters between William Chambers Sr. and the men who orchestrated the Osage murders. Survey reports Southwest tried to bury. Photographs of the original land boundaries before they were fraudulently altered. And recordings. Eleanor managed to get recordings of conversations with Southwest executives over the years. Conversations where they admitted knowing the land was stolen, admitted knowing about the bodies, admitted they didn't care as long as they got the uranium. Jessica stared at him. This could destroy them. That's why they want it so badly. That's why they've been circling this property like vultures for 40 years. They know Eleanor had evidence. They just never found where she hid it. A sound from outside made them both freeze, the rumble of engines getting closer. They're here, Frank said. Jessica made a decision. Take Emma. Get her out of here. Mommy, no! Emma grabbed Jessica's arm, tears streaming down her face. I won't leave you. Baby, listen to me. Jessica knelt, taking her daughter's face in her hands. These people are dangerous. I need to know you're safe so I can do what needs to be done. Mr. Frank is going to take you somewhere they can't find you, and I promise I will come get you as soon as this is over. But what if you don't come back? The question hit Jessica like a physical blow. She pulled Emma close, holding her so tight she could feel her daughter's heartbeat against her own. I will always come back for you. Always. No matter what. Frank put a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. Come on, little one. My wife Martha makes the best chocolate chip cookies in 3 counties, and we've got horses. You ever ridden a horse? Emma shook her head, still crying. Well, today's your lucky day. Frank met Jessica's eyes over Emma's head. I've got friends. Former military. I'll have them here within the hour. Thank you? Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. He guided Emma toward the back door, then paused. The lockbox. Don't let them get it. No matter what else happens, don't let them get that evidence. Then they were gone, disappearing through the back just as the first SUV crested the hill in front of the house. Jessica watched from the window as vehicle after vehicle rolled into the yard. 6 SUVs, just as Frank had said, plus a flatbed truck carrying drilling equipment. Men in hard hats and safety vests poured out, beginning to unload machinery with practiced efficiency. And at the center of it all, stepping out of the lead vehicle like a king surveying his domain, was a man Jessica had never seen before. He was older than Jenkins, maybe late 50s, with silver hair swept back from a face that might have been handsome once, but had hardened into something predatory. His suit probably cost more than Jessica's car. His smile probably cost more than that. He walked toward the house alone, leaving his men to their work. Jessica met him on the porch. Miss Morgan. The man's voice was cultured, controlled, with just a hint of southern drawl. I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Victor Chambers. I believe you've met my associate, Mr. Jenkins. I told him I wasn't selling. Yes, he mentioned that. Chambers' smile didn't waver. He also mentioned that you seemed resistant to persuasion. I thought perhaps a personal conversation might be more productive. There's nothing to talk about. This is my property. You're trespassing. Chambers glanced back at his men who were already setting up the drilling equipment. Technically, we're conducting a geological survey on land where we have reason to believe there may be improperly registered mineral rights. Our legal team has prepared extensive documentation supporting our position. By the time you could challenge it in court, we'll have completed our preliminary assessment and found the uranium you've been after for 40 years. Something flickered in Chambers' eyes. Surprise quickly masked. You've been reading your grandmother's journal. I wondered if she'd kept records. He stepped closer, and Jessica had to fight the urge to retreat. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, Miss Morgan. Stubborn, principled, absolutely unwilling to compromise. I respected her even as she cost my company billions in delayed development. She was protecting stolen land. She was protecting nothing. Chambers' voice hardened. The land was legally purchased in 1958. Whatever happened before, that is ancient history. The courts settled those matters decades ago. The courts were bought by your family, just like the politicians, just like everyone who ever stood between you and what you wanted. Chambers was quiet for a moment, studying her face. You really are Eleanor's granddaughter, aren't you? The same fire, the same righteousness? He shook his head almost sadly. I'll tell you what I told her all those years ago. You can't fight us. We have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers, politicians, judges. We can make your life very difficult, Miss Morgan, or we can make you very wealthy. The choice is yours. My grandmother made her choice 40 years ago, and she died alone in a rotting house watching the world pass her by. Is that what you want for yourself? For your daughter? Jessica felt cold fury rising in her chest. Don't you dare mention my daughter. I'm simply pointing out the practical considerations. Chambers spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. A single mother, no resources, no support system, trying to fight a multinational corporation. How long do you think you can last? How long before Child Protective Services starts asking questions about whether this abandoned farmhouse is a suitable environment for raising a child? The threat was clear. They would use Emma against her. Something in Jessica's expression must have changed. Because Chambers took a step back, his smile faltering for the first time. "I'm going to give you something to think about, Jessica," said her voice steady, despite the rage burning in her gut. "My grandmother spent 40 years gathering evidence. Evidence of how your family acquired this land. Evidence of the Osage murders. Evidence of every crime your people committed to get what you wanted. And I have all of it." Chambers' face went pale. "That evidence is in a very safe place. And if anything happens to me, if anything happens to my daughter, it goes straight to the FBI, the Department of Justice, and every newspaper in the country. Your company will be destroyed. Your family will be disgraced. And you will spend the rest of your life in prison." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Chambers smiled, but it was a different smile now. Thin. Dangerous. "You're bluffing. Try me." They stood facing each other, predator and prey, though Jessica was no longer certain which was which. Finally, Chambers turned and walked back toward his vehicles. As he passed his men, he called out a single word. "Stop!" The drilling equipment fell silent. The workers looked up confused. Chambers climbed into his SUV without looking back. Through the window, Jessica could see him speaking urgently into a phone, his face twisted with anger. One by one, the vehicles began to pull away. Jessica watched them go, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She had bought herself time. But time for what? The answer came 3 hours later when a battered pickup truck pulled into the yard carrying Frank Matthews' Emma and a man Jessica didn't recognize. Mommy Emma flew out of the truck and into Jessica's arms. Jessica held her daughter tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the small heart beating against her own. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not the uranium, not the evidence, not the threats. Just this. Just them. "You're okay?" Emma pulled back to examine her mother's face. "The bad men didn't hurt you." "No, baby. They left. For now." Frank approached with the stranger, a tall man in his 60s with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that held decades of patience and pain. Jessica Frank said, "This is someone you need to meet. Michael Whitehorse. Joseph Whitehorse's grandson." The name hit Jessica like a thunderbolt. Joseph Whitehorse. The man from her grandmother's journal. The man who had caught David Morgan that terrible night. The man who had helped bury the secret that Eleanor had guarded for 40 years. "You're Osage." Michael nodded. "My family has been waiting for this moment for 3 generations. Waiting for what? For someone to do what Eleanor couldn't. What my grandfather couldn't." Michael's voice was heavy with the weight of history. "Return the land to its rightful owners, and bring justice for the people who were murdered to steal it." Jessica looked at him. Really looked, seeing in his weathered face the same exhaustion and determination she felt in herself. Why didn't Eleanor just give you the land? She tried. Several times. But the legal obstacles were insurmountable. She needed documentation that proved the original theft. Proof that would hold up in federal court. It took her 40 years to gather it all. Michael paused. And then she ran out of time. But the evidence exists now. Yes, and with your cooperation, we can finally use it. Michael stepped closer. The tribal council has been preparing for this. We have lawyers, federal contacts, journalists, ready to break the story. All we need is for you to sign over the land and provide the evidence Eleanor gathered. Jessica's mind raced. It was everything her grandmother had worked for. Everything she had sacrificed her life to achieve. Justice, restitution, the land returned to those it had been stolen from. But there was something else. Something that gnawed at her conscience. What about the uranium? Michael's expression didn't change. What about it? It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more. If I sign over the land, you could mine it. Your tribe could be wealthy beyond imagination. Yes, we could. Michael was quiet for a moment. But we won't. Why not? Because that uranium sits beneath sacred ground. Beneath the bones of our ancestors who were murdered for this land. Beneath your grandfather who died for his greed? He shook his head. Some things are worth more than money. Some treasures come at too high a price. We will protect the land as Eleanor did. We will not desecrate it. Jessica felt tears prickling at her eyes. 40 years. Her grandmother had spent 40 years waiting for someone who would understand. Someone who would do the right thing, not because it was profitable, but because it was right. And now that someone was here. I'll do it, she said. I'll sign whatever you need me to sign. Michael's face broke into a smile that transformed his weathered features. Your grandmother would be proud. Before they could say anything else, Frank's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his expression darkened. We've got a problem. What Chambers isn't giving up. He's got a court order. Emergency injunction claiming the property is in dispute pending mineral rights resolution. Sheriff's on his way to enforce it. Jessica's brief moment of hope shattered. Can he do that? With the right judge? He can do damn near anything. Frank was already moving toward his truck. But I've got friends coming. Former Rangers like me. They'll be here within the hour. And I've called a journalist I know in Oklahoma City. Whatever happens tonight, it's going to be on the record. Michael put a hand on Jessica's shoulder. This is how they operate. Pressure, threats, legal maneuvering. They think they can wear you down, make you give up like everyone else did. His eyes met hers. They don't know who they're dealing with. Jessica looked at Emma, who was watching all of this with wide, frightened eyes. Baby, I need you to be very brave. Can you do that for me? Emma nodded, clutching Mr. Buttons tight. Remember what you said when we first got here about fixing things. We can fix anything if we're together. That's right, and we're going to fix this. Together. The sheriff's cruiser arrived 20 minutes later, flanked by 2 more Southwest SUVs. Sheriff Wade Thornton was a big man, uncomfortable in his uniform, clearly unhappy about the task he'd been assigned. He approached the house slowly, a folded document in his hand, not meeting Jessica's eyes. Miss Morgan, I've got a court order here authorizing Southwest Resource to conduct geological surveys on this property pending resolution of mineral rights disputes. I'm required to ensure their access. Jessica stood on the porch, Frank on one side, Michael on the other. Behind them, Emma watched from the window, her small face pale but determined. This is my property, Sheriff. These men are trespassing. Ma'am, I don't like this any more than you do, but Judge Harmon signed the order. Until it's overturned, I've got to enforce it. Victor Chambers emerged from one of the SUVs, his smile back in place. Thank you, Sheriff. We won't take long. Just a few hours of drilling some core samples. You won't even know we were here. He started toward the house, but Frank stepped forward, blocking his path. That's far enough. Chambers' smile faltered. Excuse me, you heard me. I'm Frank Matthews. Retired Army Ranger, former federal employee, and current registered voter in this county. And I'm telling you that if you set 1 foot on this property without Miss Morgan's permission, I will personally ensure that you regret it. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Now, Frank, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Hard? You want to talk about hard? Frank's voice rose. I served 3 tours in Vietnam. I've been shot, stabbed, and left for dead in a jungle 10,000 miles from home. You think some corporate suit in a fancy car scares me? Chambers' face reddened. Sheriff, arrest this man for obstruction. Thornton hesitated. He'd known Frank Matthews for 30 years. He'd seen what the man was capable of. Frank, please. Just step aside. Let them do their survey. We can sort out the legal stuff later. No. The single word hung in the air like a gunshot. No, I'm not stepping aside. I'm not letting them through, and neither is anyone else. Frank gestured toward the road where a dust cloud was approaching, because my friends just arrived. 3 pickup trucks came rolling into the yard carrying a dozen men. Old men, most of them gray-haired and weathered, but with the bearing of warriors who had never forgotten their training. Former Rangers, brothers in ours. Men who had answered Frank's call without hesitation. They took up positions around the property, not threatening, just present. A silent declaration that Jessica Morgan was not alone. Sheriff Thornton looked at the gathering forces at Chambers' security team, at the small woman on the porch who refused to back down. He made his decision. Mr. Chambers, I think we need to take this back to the court. Get some clarification before we proceed. Chambers' face contorted with rage. I have a court order, and I have a situation that's about to get very ugly if I don't slow things down. Thornton's voice was firm. I'm not going to be responsible for a confrontation that ends with someone getting hurt. We'll revisit this tomorrow with proper legal oversight. Chambers looked like he wanted to argue, but his security team was already backing toward their vehicles. They could see what he couldn't, that this was not a fight they wanted. This isn't over. Chambers hissed at Jessica. No, she agreed. It isn't. He left his convoy, disappearing down the road in a cloud of dust and frustrated ambition. Jessica turned to Frank, to Michael, to the assembled veterans who had come to stand with her. Thank you, she said. Thank you all. Don't thank us yet. Frank's expression was grim. Chambers will be back, probably with state troopers next time, maybe federal agents if he can swing it. We've bought some time, but not much. Then we need to use it. What do you have in mind? Jessica looked at Michael. You said the tribal council had lawyers, journalists, people ready to help. They're standing by, waiting for the word. Then give them the word. She took a deep breath. It's time to tell the world what's really under this land, and what was done to steal it. Michael nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. Your grandmother would be so proud. Jessica looked back at the house, at Emma watching from the window, at the land that had been fought over for generations. I hope so, she said softly. I really hope so. As the sun set over Oklahoma, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, Jessica felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, certainty. This was what she was meant to do. This was why Eleanor had left her the farm, why the evidence had been gathered, or why everything in her life had led to this moment. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been crushed by powerful men who thought their wealth made them untouchable. And she was going to win. Mommy. Emma had come outside, Mr. Buttons still clutched in her arms. Yes, baby, are we going to be okay? Jessica knelt down, taking her daughter's hands. We're going to be better than okay. We're going to make things right. For great-grandma. For all the people who were hurt. For everyone. Emma nodded solemnly. We can fix it. Yeah, baby. Jessica pulled her daughter close. We can fix it. Above them, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, calling to its pack. The battle for the Morgan farm was far from over, but for the first time, Jessica truly believed they could win. The call came at 4:47 a.m. Jessica had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep on the floor beside Emma when her phone shattered the silence. She fumbled for it in the darkness, heart already pounding. Miss Morgan? Michael Whitehorse's voice was tight with urgency. We have a problem, a big one. What happened? Someone broke into the tribal council office, ransacked the place. They were looking for something specific. Jessica's blood ran cold. The evidence, it's safe. I moved it yesterday after our meeting, but they know we're making moves. They're getting desperate. From outside came the sound of a vehicle approaching. Jessica crawled to the window, peering through the grimy glass. Frank's truck, but something was wrong. The headlights were off, and he was driving fast, recklessly fast. I'll call you back, Jessica said, ending the call. She was at the door when Frank burst through it, his face ashen. They took her. What? Who? Martha? Frank's voice cracked. I went home to check on things, make sure she was okay. The house was torn apart, signs of a struggle, and this was on the kitchen table. He thrust a piece of paper into Jessica's hands. The message was simple, typed on plain white paper. Return the evidence. Come alone. Abandoned grain silo, Route 7. Dawn. Or the old woman dies. Jessica's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the paper. They have your wife. Frank nodded, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscles twitching. This is my fault, Jessica whispered. I brought this down on you, on all of you. No, Frank grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. This is their fault. Chambers and his people. They're the monsters here, not you. But Martha knew the risks. We both did. He took a shaky breath. I'm not going to let them win. And neither are you. What do? We go get her? Jessica stared at him. They said to come alone. If we show up with people, I'm not suggesting we bring an army. Frank's eye hardened. But I'm also not suggesting we walk into an obvious trap without backup. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Mommy, what's wrong? Jessica made a split-second decision. She crossed to her daughter, kneeling down. Baby, I need you to do something very important. Remember how brave you were yesterday? Emma nodded, clutching Mr. Buttons. I need you to be even braver now. Mr. Michael is going to come get you. You're going to stay with him while Mommy and Mr. Frank do something important. You're going to help Mrs. Martha. Yes, baby, we're going to help Mrs. Martha. Emma's lower lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Be careful, Mommy. Promise, I promise. Michael arrived 15 minutes later. The handoff was quick, Emma clinging to Jessica one last time before being bundled into Michael's truck. If anything happens to us, Jessica told him, get Emma somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find her, and make sure the evidence gets out. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me. Michael hesitated, then nodded. I promise. Jessica watched the truck disappear into the pre-dawn darkness, carrying her daughter away from danger. Away from her. It might be the last time she ever saw Emma. She couldn't think about that now. Route 7, she said to Frank. How far? 20 minutes. Maybe less if I push it. Then push it. They drove in silence through the Oklahoma night, the world outside the truck windows nothing but darkness and shadows. Jessica's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Chambers had crossed a line. Kidnapping wasn't just corporate hardball, it was a federal crime, which meant either he was confident he could cover it up or he was desperate enough not to care. Either way, Martha was in danger. Real danger. Tell me about your wife, Jessica said suddenly. Frank glanced at her surprised. Why? Because I need to know who we're fighting for. Frank was quiet for a moment. We met in '72. I'd just come back from my third tour. messed up in ways I couldn't explain. Drinking too much, fighting too much, ready to eat a bullet and call it a day. He paused. Martha found me in a bar 3 sheets to the wind trying to pick a fight with anyone who'd oblige. She was a waitress there. Tiny thing, maybe 5 foot nothing, but she walked right up to me, looked me in the eye, and said, "You're better than this." "What did you do?" Laughed in her face. Told her she didn't know anything about me. Frank's voice softened. She said, "You're right, but I'd like to." And she sat down across from me and waited, just waited, until I was ready to talk. She sounds extraordinary. She saved my life. Frank's hands tightened on the wheel. Every day for 50 years she's saved my life. And now these bastards have her. We're going to get her back. Damn right we are. The grain silo appeared in the first gray light of dawn, a rusting metal hulk rising from the flat Oklahoma landscape like a tombstone. 3 vehicles were parked outside. Southwest SUVs. "They're here," Jessica said unnecessarily. Frank pulled the truck to a stop about 50 yards away. "Plan, I go in. You find another way in. We get Martha, and we get out. And if they try to stop us," Frank reached under his seat and pulled out a handgun, checking the clip with practiced efficiency. "Then we stop them first." Jessica got out of the truck, her legs unsteady. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to protect herself. But Martha was in there, an innocent woman who had done nothing except be kind to strangers. This was Jessica's fight. She would see it through. The silo door was open. She stepped inside. "Miss Morgan, welcome." Victor Chambers stood in the center of the empty space, flanked by 4 men in dark suits. Behind them, tied to a metal support beam, was Martha Matthews. She was alive. Bruised, terrified, but alive. "Martha," Jessica called out, "are you okay? Don't worry about me, honey." Martha's voice was steady despite her fear. "Frank and I have been through worse." Chambers laughed. "Such spirit. I can see why your husband is so devoted." He stepped toward Jessica. "Now then, let's discuss the terms of our arrangement." "There's nothing to discuss. Let her go." "Oh, but there is." Chambers' smile was cold. "You have something I want. Evidence that could be very damaging to my company. I want it back. And if I refuse," Chambers nodded to one of his men who stepped forward and struck Martha across the face. "Don't," Jessica lunged forward, but 2 more men grabbed her arms, holding her in place. "Every hour you delay," Chambers said calmly, "she suffers. Every day something worse. I'm a patient man, Miss Morgan, but my patience has limits. You're insane. You can't just kidnap people. You can't torture them. This isn't some third world dictatorship. No, it's Oklahoma, and I own Oklahoma." Chambers stepped closer. "The police work for me. The judges work for me. The politicians work for me. Who exactly do you think is going to stop me? I will." A new voice from the darkness at the edge of the silo. Frank Matthews stepped into the light, gun raised, aimed directly at Chambers' head. "Let my wife go, now." Chambers didn't flinch. "Ah, Mr. Matthews, I wondered when you'd appear." He gestured to his men. "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. Put the weapon down before someone gets hurt. I've killed better men than you for less reason, I don't doubt it. But can you kill all 4 of my associates before one of them puts a bullet in your wife? Or Miss Morgan?" Frank's jaw tightened. His gun hand trembled slightly. "I didn't think so." Chambers turned back to Jessica. "Now, the evidence." "Where is it?" Jessica's mind raced. Frank couldn't shoot his way out of this. Even if he took down one or 2 of them, the others would kill Martha, would kill her. There had to be another way. "It's at the farmhouse," she said. Chambers' eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying. It's hidden, in a place you never found, because you don't know the house like I do. Then you'll take me there, show me exactly where it is." "Fine, but Martha comes with us." "And Frank, do you think you're in a position to make demands? I think you want that evidence badly enough to agree to almost anything." Jessica forced herself to meet his gaze. "And I think killing us now would raise too many questions, even for you." Chambers studied her for a long moment. "Very well, we all go, together." He snapped his fingers and his men released. Jessica began untying Martha. "But if this is a trick, Miss Morgan, if you're wasting my time, I will make you watch while I destroy everything and everyone you love." They loaded into the vehicles, Jessica and Martha in one SUV, Frank in another, his gun confiscated. The convoy moved through the early morning, heading back to the farmhouse. "Are you okay?" Jessica whispered to Martha. "I've had worse anniversaries." Martha managed a weak smile. "That man's a monster." "I know. Frank's going to kill him. You know that, right? The minute he gets a chance. I'm counting on it." They arrived at the farmhouse just as the sun fully crested the horizon, flooding the property with golden light. Chambers stepped out of the lead vehicle, surveying the dilapidated house with distaste. Your grandmother lived here for 40 years. Such dedication to such a miserable existence. She was protecting something worth protecting, Jessica said. She was protecting stolen property. She was protecting stolen people. There's a difference. Chambers waved dismissively. Philosophy. Take me to the evidence. Jessica led him into the house, acutely aware of the men following behind, of Frank being held at gunpoint, of Martha barely able to walk. This had to work. It was their only chance. In here, she said, leading Chambers to the study. He looked around the dusty room, frowning. I don't see anything. Jessica moved to the fireplace, running her hand along the mantel until she found the catch. Your people searched this house a dozen times over the years. They never found this. She pressed the catch. The wall swung open. Chambers' eyes went wide. The secret compartment was there just as Frank had shown her. But inside wasn't the lockbox of evidence. Inside was a body, a skeleton really. Dressed in rotted clothes, collapsed against the back of the hidden space like it had been sealed in there decades ago. What the hell? Chambers stumbled backward. Jessica's heart pounded. She hadn't known. Frank hadn't told her this was here. The evidence had been moved, but the body... Chambers turned to her, his face pale with rage. What is this? Some kind of joke? No joke. Jessica's voice shook. This is William Chambers, your grandfather. Impossible. My grandfather died in a car accident in 1965. Did he? Or is that just what your family told everyone? A voice from the doorway. Michael Whitehorse stepped into the room, flanked by 2 tribal police officers. And behind them, video cameras rolling. Your grandfather didn't die in any accident, Michael continued. He was murdered, right here in this house in 1965, by his own partners when he tried to back out of the scheme to steal Osage land. Chambers' face went white. My grandmother found the body when she moved in, Michael said. She left it where it was. Evidence of what your family was capable of. And now thanks to you bringing us here with cameras rolling, we have you on record. Kidnapping, assault, breaking and entering. And in a moment, we'll have DNA confirmation that Victor Chambers III has been standing in the same room as the remains of Victor Chambers I. This is a setup, Chambers snarled. This is justice. Jessica stepped toward him. 40 years overdue. Chambers' men reached for their weapons, but more people were pouring into the house now. Frank's veteran friends, FBI agents, journalists with cameras flashing. Victor Chambers, an agent, announced you're under arrest for kidnapping, assault, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent? Chambers struggled as they cuffed him, his face twisted with fury. You don't know what you've done, you stupid woman. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Jessica watched them drag him away. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, she said. A man who thought his money made him untouchable. He was wrong. Frank appeared at her side, Martha leaning heavily against him. You okay? Jessica nodded, though her hands were still shaking. How did you know? About the body? Frank's expression was unreadable. Eleanor told me, years ago, said it was her insurance policy. If Chambers ever pushed too hard, she could prove his family was built on murder. Not just Osage murder. Their own blood. Why didn't she use it? Because she was waiting. Frank looked at Jessica with something like pride. Waiting for someone strong enough to finish what she started. The next few hours passed in a blur of statements, photographs, and interviews. The FBI took over the scene, treating the farmhouse as a crime scene spanning multiple decades. Forensic teams carefully extracted the remains of Victor Chambers Sr., whose murder had been covered up for nearly 60 years. Michael worked with tribal lawyers to file emergency motions using the morning's events as evidence of Southwest's criminal conspiracy. The evidence Eleanor had gathered is safely hidden at the tribal council's backup location was officially entered into federal record. And through it all, Jessica waited for the one thing that mattered. She was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her when Michael's truck appeared on the road. Emma was out before the vehicle fully stopped running across the yard, launching herself into Jessica's arms. Mommy! Mommy, you came back. I told you I would. Jessica held her daughter tight, tears streaming down her face. I will always come back. Did you help Mrs. Martha? We helped Mrs. Martha. Emma pulled back, examining her mother's face. You look tired. I am tired, baby, but it's a good tired. Frank and Martha approached the older woman, moving slowly but with her head held high. Thank you, Martha said simply. For everything. Thank you. You were the brave one. Martha laughed softly. I was terrified every second, but I knew Frank would come. He always comes. Frank put his arm around his wife, holding her like he would never let go. We should get you to a hospital, he said gently. I want to stay. See this through. You've seen enough." Martha shook her head stubbornly. 50 years I've been married to this man. 50 years I've heard about this land, this secret, this fight. I'm not leaving until it's finished." Michael joined them, his phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call, his face split by a wide smile. That was Washington. The Department of Justice is opening a full investigation into Southwest Resource. They're freezing all company assets pending criminal charges. "What about the land?" Jessica asked. "The Tribal Council is filing emergency motions to recognize the original Osage claim. With the evidence Eleanor gathered, plus what happened today, the lawyers say we have an unprecedented case. How long? Could be months. Could be years. Legal battles like this don't end quickly. But for the first time in 100 years, we have a real chance." Jessica looked at the farmhouse, at the land stretching out in all directions, at the people who had fought beside her. What happens now? Now? Michael's smile softened. "Now we do what should have been done generations ago. We tell the truth, we seek justice, and we make sure no one ever forgets what was done here. And the uranium stays in the ground, where it belongs." Michael's voice was firm. "That was always the plan. The land is sacred. The uranium is part of that. We're not going to desecrate our ancestors' resting place for money. Even though it's worth hundreds of millions, some things are worth more than money." "Miss Morgan, your grandmother understood that. I hope you do too." Jessica thought about the eviction notice back in Detroit, the $11 in her bank account, the years of struggle and poverty and desperation. Then she looked at Emma, who was watching a butterfly drift across the yard, her face full of wonder at the simple beauty of the world. "Yeah," Jessica said quietly. "I think I do." The sun was setting when Jessica finally had a moment alone. She walked to the old oak tree behind the house, the one Eleanor's journal had mentioned, the one under which David Morgan had been buried for 60 years. There was no marker, no gravestone, just a patch of earth beneath ancient branches. "I don't know if you can hear me," Jessica said softly. "I don't know if any of this matters to you now, but I wanted you to know. It's over. The secret you died for, the burden Eleanor carried all those years. It's finally going to be put right." She knelt, pressing her palm against the cool earth. "I'm sorry for what happened to you, for the choices you made that led to this, but I'm grateful too. Because somehow all of it, the tragedy, the sacrifice, the decades of waiting brought me here, gave me a purpose, a reason to fight." The wind rustled through the oak leaves, sounding almost like a whisper. "Rest now," she said. "Both of you. You've guarded this land long enough. I'll take it from here." "Mommy?" Emma had followed her Mr. Buttons dangling from one hand. "Hey, baby, what are you doing out here? I wanted to see where Great-Grandpa was buried." Jessica hesitated. "How did you know about that? The journal. I read some of it while you were talking to the police people." Emma's eyes were serious. "He did bad things, didn't he? That's why he's buried here instead of in a real cemetery. He made mistakes, big ones. But he was also your great-grandfather, and he's part of our family's story." Emma considered this. "Does that mean we're bad too, because of what he did? No, baby?" Jessica pulled her daughter close. "We're not responsible for the choices other people made. We're only responsible for our own choices. And today we made good ones. We helped the people whose land was stolen." "Yes." "And we stopped the bad men." "Yes." Emma nodded, satisfied. "Then we're the good guys." Jessica laughed, the sound surprising her. When had she last laughed? "Yeah, baby, we're the good guys." They walked back to the house together, hand in hand, as the last light faded from the Oklahoma sky. Behind them, beneath the old oak tree, generations of secrets finally began to rest. And ahead of them, for the first time in longer than Jessica could remember, the future looked bright. 3 weeks after Victor Chambers was led away in handcuffs, Jessica woke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. She grabbed it, squinting at the screen. 6:23 a.m. Unknown number. "Hello, Miss Morgan. This is Agent Patricia Reyes, FBI. We need you at the federal courthouse in Oklahoma City, immediately." Jessica sat up, her heart already racing. What happened? Victor Chambers made bail last night. $10 million, and he's disappeared. The drive to Oklahoma City took 2 hours. Jessica pushed her old Honda as fast as it would go, her mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. Chambers was out, free, and gone. Frank had insisted on coming with her, leaving Martha and Emma at the ranch under the watchful eye of his veteran friends. Michael Whitehorse met them at the courthouse, his face grim. "How is this possible?" Jessica demanded. "He kidnapped someone. He assaulted her. He was caught on camera. Money," Michael said simply. "The right lawyers. A sympathetic judge. The Chambers family has been buying their way out of consequences for 100 years. This is just the latest example." Agent Reyes was waiting for them inside a tall woman with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she was as furious as Jessica felt. "I want to be clear," Reyes said. "This wasn't our call. We opposed bail. The prosecutor opposed bail. But Judge Harrison has a history of ruling favorably for corporate defendants, and Chambers' legal team exploited every loophole. So he just walks free. He posted bail. That's not the same as walking free. He's wearing an ankle monitor. He's supposed to stay within state lines. But you don't know where he is." Reyes hesitated. "The ankle monitor was removed approximately 4 hours after he left custody. We found it in a dumpster outside a gas station in Tulsa." Jessica felt sick. "He's coming for me. We don't know that." "Yes, you do. That's why you called me at 6 in the morning. Reyes didn't deny it. "We're assigning protective detail. 2 agents round the clock. You and your daughter will be safe." "Safe." Jessica almost laughed. There was no such thing as safe. Not anymore. "What about the case?" Frank asked. "The evidence, the land transfer, all of it, proceeding as planned. Chambers' disappearance actually helps us in some ways. It makes him look guilty. Flight from justice doesn't play well with juries. But if he's not caught, then we try him in absentia if necessary. The evidence stands on its own." Jessica stared out the window at the Oklahoma City skyline. "He's not going to run," she said quietly. "That's not who he is." "What do you mean Chambers doesn't run from problems?" "He eliminates them." She turned to face them. "He's not fleeing. He's planning." Planning what Jessica met Reyes' eyes. Whatever it takes to make this all go away. The FBI detail arrived at the farmhouse that afternoon. 2 agents, young and professional, who set up a command post in what had been Eleanor's study. Emma watched them with wide eyes. "Are they police?" sort of, Jessica said. "They're here to keep us safe. From the bad man, yes, baby, from the bad man." Emma considered this, then nodded seriously. "I don't like him. The bad man. He hurt Mrs. Martha." "I know. I don't like him either. Will they catch him?" Jessica hesitated. She wanted to say yes. Wanted to promise her daughter that justice would prevail, that the good guys always won, that the world was fundamentally fair. But she'd stopped believing in fairy tales a long time ago. "They're trying," she said finally. "That's all any of us can do? Try?" The first 3 days passed without incident. Jessica tried to establish some kind of normal routine. Breakfast with Emma, homeschooling lessons at the kitchen table, afternoon walks around the property always within sight of the FBI agents. Dinner with Frank and Martha, who had effectively moved into the farmhouse to help. But normal was impossible. Every car that passed on the road made Jessica's heart pound. Every unexpected sound sent her reaching for the phone. She slept in fragments, waking at the slightest creak of the old house settling. On the 4th night, she woke to complete silence. Too much silence. The FBI agents had been maintaining regular check-ins every 2 hours. She'd heard them at midnight at 2 a.m., but now her phone showed 4:17 and there had been nothing. Jessica slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Emma, and crept toward the study. The door was open, the lights were on, but the agents weren't there. Their equipment was still set up, coffee cups still on the desk, one of them still steaming slightly, but the chairs were empty, the room was abandoned. Jessica's blood turned to ice. She grabbed her phone, started to dial 911. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." She spun around. Howard Jenkins stood in the doorway, a gun in his hand. "Where are they?" Jessica demanded. "The agents. What did you do to them? They're fine, temporarily incapacitated. They'll wake up with headaches and no memory of the last few hours." Jenkins's smile was cold. "Mr. Chambers sent me to deliver a message." "What message?" "This ends tonight, one way or another." Jenkins gestured with the gun. "You're going to come with me. Quietly, without waking your daughter. And we're going to have a conversation with Mr. Chambers about the future of this property. And if I refuse, then I go upstairs and bring your daughter instead. Your choice." Jessica's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to run, to do something. But Emma was upstairs. Sleeping, vulnerable. She couldn't risk it. "Let me leave her a note so she doesn't wake up alone and scared." Jenkins considered this, then nodded. "Make it quick." Jessica found a piece of paper, scrawled a message. "Going to talk to someone. Stay with Mr. Frank. I love you. Mommy." It wasn't enough. Nothing would be enough if she didn't come back. But it was all she could do. Jenkins led her to a black SUV parked behind the barn out of sight of the road. Another man sat in the driver's seat, face obscured by shadows. They drove in silence through the pre-dawn darkness, heading away from the farmhouse, away from everything familiar. "Where are we going?" "You'll see. Is Chambers going to kill me?" Jenkins didn't answer. That told her everything she needed to know. They drove for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. The SUV finally stopped at an abandoned industrial site, rusting tanks and crumbling buildings, barely visible in the first gray light of dawn. Chambers was waiting inside one of the buildings, standing in a pool of light from a single working fixture. He looked different than before. Disheveled. Desperate. The polished corporate facade had cracked, revealing something raw and dangerous underneath. "Miss Morgan." He didn't smile. "Thank you for coming. I didn't have much choice." "No, I suppose you didn't." Chambers began to pace. "Do you know what you've done to me? Do you have any idea I exposed the truth about your family? You destroyed my life." The words exploded out of him. "Everything I've built, everything my father built, everything my grandfather built, 100 years of work, of planning, of careful cultivation, all of it gone. Because of you, because of that crazy old woman and her obsession with justice. Your family built their fortune on murder, on stolen land, on a century of lies." And Chambers' laugh was bitter. "You think we're unique? You think every great American fortune isn't built on blood and theft? The railroads, the oil companies, the tech giants, all of them, all of us. That's how empires are made. That's how the world works. Not anymore." Chambers stopped pacing, staring at her with something that might have been respect. "You really believe that, don't you? That you can change things? That one woman with nothing can bring down men with everything?" "I believe that the truth matters." Jessica's voice was steady despite her fear. "I believe that justice delayed isn't justice denied. I believe that my grandmother spent 40 years guarding this secret because she knew that someday the world would be ready to hear it. Your grandmother was a fool, and so are you. Maybe, but this fool is still standing, and you're the one hiding in an abandoned building in the middle of nowhere." Chambers' face contorted with rage. "You think this is winning? You think because you got lucky, because you stumbled onto evidence my people should have found decades ago, that you've won?" He stepped closer. "I still have resources you can't imagine. I still have people who owe me. I can disappear, rebuild somewhere else, start again. But first I'm going to finish what I started. By killing me, by eliminating the problem. Yes. And then what my daughter talks, Frank talks, Michael Whitehorse and the entire Osage Nation talk. The FBI has everything. Killing me doesn't make any of that go away." "No, but it makes me feel better." He nodded to Jenkins, who raised his gun. Jessica closed her eyes. Thought of Emma, of the way her daughter laughed, of the way she said mommy like it was the most important word in the world, of all the things they would never do together, all the memories they would never make. "I'm sorry, baby," she thought. "I tried." A gunshot shattered the silence. But Jessica didn't fall. She opened her eyes. Jenkins was on the ground, clutching his arm, his gun skittering across the concrete floor. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the growing light, was Frank Matthews. "Step away from her, Chambers." Chambers spun around his face, twisting with disbelief. How did you find us, GPS tracker?" Frank advanced into the building, gun steady, sewn into Jessica's jacket 3 weeks ago, right after the first time your people showed up. He kicked Jenkins's gun away, keeping his weapon trained on Chambers. "You're not the only one who can plan ahead. You're making a mistake, old man. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with." "A scared little boy playing dress-up in his grandfather's suit?" Frank's voice was cold. "Men like you think money makes you powerful, think you can buy your way out of anything. But there are some things money can't buy." "Like what?" "Like the 40 years I spent learning how to kill people who thought they were untouchable. Like the loyalty of men who've bled together in places you can't pronounce. Like the satisfaction I'm going to feel watching them drag you to prison." Chambers' hand moved toward his jacket. "Don't." Frank's gun didn't waver. "I've killed better men than you, Chambers. Don't make me add your name to the list." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Chambers' shoulders slumped. "All right." He raised his hand slowly. "You win. This round." Frank moved forward, pulling zip ties from his pocket. "Jessica, you okay?" She was shaking so badly she could barely stand, but she nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay." Frank secured Chambers' hands behind his back, then did the same to the groaning Jenkins. "Called the FBI before I left the house," he said. "They should be here any minute." "How did you know?" Jessica asked. "That he'd come for me because it's what I would have done." Frank met her eyes. "Men like Chambers, they can't accept losing, can't accept that someone like you could beat them. Their pride won't allow it. I knew he'd make a move. I just had to be ready when he did." The sound of sirens in the distance growing closer. Chambers looked up at Jessica, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The fear of a man who would finally run out of options. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is." Jessica knelt down to his level. "My grandmother spent 40 years waiting for this moment. My daughter spent 3 weeks wondering if she'd ever see her mother again, and you spent your whole life thinking you could buy your way out of consequences." She stood up. "You were wrong about all of it, Mr. Chambers. The truth always comes out. Justice always finds a way, and people like you always fall." The FBI vehicles arrived minutes later, followed by news vans that had somehow gotten wind of the situation. Chambers was loaded into a federal transport this time with no possibility of bail. Agent Reyes approached Jessica as the chaos swirled around them. "Are you all right? I will be. We found our agents. Drugged, like Jenkins said, they're being treated at the hospital. And Chambers' federal custody? No bail this time. And with the attempted murder charge on top of everything else?" Reyes shook her head. "He's done. His lawyers can delay, but they can't stop what's coming." Jessica watched the transport vehicle drive away, carrying Victor Chambers to a future he had never imagined for himself. A future behind bars. "It's really over," she said softly. "The criminal case, yes. The civil matters will take longer. Land transfers, reparations, all of that." But the hard part, Reyes almost smiled. "Yeah, that's over." Frank appeared at Jessica's side. "Ready to go home." Home. The word felt strange in her mouth. 3 weeks ago, she hadn't had a home. Hadn't had anything except a daughter, an eviction notice, and a desperate hope that something would change. Now she had a farmhouse in Oklahoma, a community that had rallied around her, a purpose that extended beyond mere survival. And Emma. Always Emma. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." They arrived back at the farmhouse just as the sun was fully rising. Emma was standing on the porch with Martha, her face streaked with tears Mr. Buttons clutched so tightly his seams were straining. The moment she saw Jessica, she launched herself off the porch and across the yard. "Mommy, Mommy, you came back!" Jessica caught her daughter, lifting her up, holding her so tight she could feel both their hearts beating. "I told you I would. I will always come back. I was so scared. I woke up and you were gone and the police people were asleep and I didn't know what to do. You did exactly right. You stayed with Mrs. Martha. You were so brave." Emma pulled back to look at her mother's face. "Did they catch the bad man?" "Yes, baby, they caught him. He's going to prison for a very long time." "Good." Emma's expression was fierce. "He deserved it." "Yes, he did." Martha had joined them, her eyes wet. "Thank God. When Frank left, when he told me what was happening, I've been praying ever since. Your prayers worked." Jessica reached out to squeeze Martha's hand. "Thank you for everything." Frank emerged from his truck looking tired but satisfied. "The FBI wants statements from all of us. They're sending someone out this afternoon." "Can it wait?" Jessica asked. I just need a minute with my daughter." Frank nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready." Jessica carried Emma into the house, up the stairs to the bedroom they'd been sharing since that first night. She lay down on the bed with her daughter in her arms, feeling the warmth of Emma's small body, the rhythm of her breathing. "Mommy," Emma's voice was sleepy. She'd been awake half the night, worrying. "Yes, baby, are we going to stay here in Great-Grandma's house?" Jessica thought about the question, about the farmhouse with its peeling paint and sagging porch, about the land that had been fought over for generations, about the uranium deposit worth $500 million that would never be touched. "Do you want to stay?" Emma nodded against her chest. "I like it here. I like Mr. Frank and Mrs. Martha. I like Michael. I like the birds and the wind and how you can see the stars at night." She yawned. "And I think Great-Grandma would want us to stay, to take care of her house for her." Jessica felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Yeah, baby, I think you're right. So we'll stay. Emma smiled, her eyes already closing. "Good, because we can fix it, Mommy. You and me, we can fix anything." Within minutes, she was asleep. Jessica lay there holding her daughter, watching the morning light creep across the ceiling. 3 weeks ago, she'd had nothing. Now she had everything that mattered. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Jessica Morgan felt at peace. The legal proceedings moved faster than anyone expected. With Chambers facing federal charges for kidnapping, attempted murder, and flight from justice, his legal team's ability to delay the civil matters evaporated. The tribal council's claim to the land moved through the courts with unprecedented speed, supported by Eleanor's evidence and the newly discovered remains of Victor Chambers Sr. 6 weeks after that morning at the abandoned industrial site, Jessica stood in a federal courthouse in Oklahoma City watching as a judge signed the final documents transferring ownership of the Morgan farm to the Osage Nation. The land that had been stolen 100 years ago was finally going home. Miss Morgan. Michael Whitehorse approached her after the ceremony, his eyes bright. "I want to thank you, on behalf of my family, on behalf of my people. What I did was finish what my grandmother started. You could have sold the land, taken the uranium money. No one would have blamed you. I would have blamed me." Jessica looked at Emma, who was examining a display case of historical documents with intense concentration. "I want my daughter to know that some things are more important than money, that doing the right thing matters even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Michael nodded slowly. "The tribal council has been discussing what to do with the property. We'd like to preserve the farmhouse as a historical site, a memorial to Eleanor Morgan and her 40 years of guardianship." Jessica felt a lump rise in her throat. She would have liked that. "We'd also like to offer you a position. Director of the memorial site. Someone to tell the story, to make sure future generations understand what happened here and why it matters. You're offering me a job more than a job, a purpose." Michael smiled. "The house is yours to live in, rent-free for as long as you want. Emma can attend the tribal school. You'd be part of our community." Jessica stared at him, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say. Say yes, Mommy." Emma had appeared at her side, bouncing with excitement. "I heard everything. We get to stay in Great-Grandma's house forever, and I get to go to a real school, and you get to tell people about all the brave things Great-Grandma did." Jessica laughed, pulling her daughter close. "I guess the decision's made." Michael extended his hand. "Welcome to the family, Miss Morgan." Jessica shook it firmly. "Call me Jessica." They drove back to the farmhouse as the sun was setting, painting the Oklahoma sky in shades of gold and crimson. Frank and Martha were waiting on the porch, a celebration dinner already prepared. Michael had called ahead to share the news. To Jessica, Frank said, raising a glass of iced tea, "The stubbornest woman I've ever met, and I mean that as the highest compliment." To Mommy, Emma raised her own glass of lemonade. "The bravest mommy in the whole world." Jessica felt tears pricking at her eyes as she looked around at the people who had become her family. Frank and Martha, who had risked everything to help her. Michael, who had waited decades for justice. And Emma, her beautiful, fierce, determined daughter, who had never stopped believing they could fix anything if they just tried hard enough. To Eleanor, Jessica said quietly, "Who guarded this land for 40 years, waiting for someone to finish what she started." She raised her glass. "We did it, Grandma. We finally did it." They clinked glasses as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, and somewhere Jessica could have sworn she heard her grandmother's voice carried on the wind, whispering two simple words: "Thank you." 1 year later, Jessica stood at the podium in the newly renovated Eleanor Morgan Memorial Center, looking out at a crowd of over 300 people. The farmhouse had been transformed. Not into something unrecognizable, but into something better. The bones were the same, the character preserved, but now the walls stood straight, the roof no longer leaked, and the porch welcomed visitors instead of warning them away. Today marked the official opening of the memorial, and people had come from across the country to witness it. Journalists, historians, tribal leaders, government officials, even a few celebrities who had taken up the cause of Indigenous land rights. But Jessica wasn't looking at any of them. She was looking at Emma, sitting in the front row between Frank and Martha, her 9-year-old face beaming with pride. 1 year ago, Jessica began, her voice steady. "I drove up to this farmhouse with nothing but my daughter, an eviction notice, and the desperate hope that something would change. What I found was a secret that had been buried for generations. A fortune in uranium, a history of theft and murder, and a grandmother I never knew who had spent 40 years guarding this land, waiting for someone to finish what she started." She paused, gathering herself. Eleanor Morgan could have been rich. She could have sold this land, taken the uranium money, lived in comfort for the rest of her life. Instead, she chose to stand watch, alone, in a falling down house, because she believed that some things matter more than money, because she believed that justice delayed is not justice denied, because she believed that someday, somehow, the truth would come out. Jessica's eyes found Michael Whitehorse in the crowd. She was right. The applause that followed was thunderous. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and reporters conducted interviews, Jessica slipped away to the old oak tree behind the house. The grave markers were new, installed just last month. One for David Morgan, whose remains had been properly exhumed and laid to rest. One for Eleanor Morgan, whose ashes had been scattered here according to her wishes. And one for Victor Chambers Sr., whose body had been returned to his family despite everything, because even monsters deserved burial. 3 people, 3 choices, 3 destinies intertwined beneath this ancient tree. Mommy Emma had followed her as she always did. "Hey baby, shouldn't you be inside enjoying the party? I wanted to check on you." Emma slipped her hand into Jessica's. "You look sad up there." At the end, not sad, just thinking about all the people who aren't here. Great-Grandma Eleanor, Great-Grandpa David, all the Osage families who were hurt. Jessica squeezed her daughter's hand. I wish they could see this. See what we built. See that it wasn't all for nothing. Emma was quiet for a moment. I think they can see, she said finally. I think when you do something good, the people who helped you get there, they know. Somehow. Even if they're gone. Jessica looked at her daughter, marveling as she often did at the wisdom that lived inside this small person. When did you get so smart I learned from you? They stood together in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, as the Oklahoma wind rustled through the oak leaves. Miss Morgan Jessica turned to find a young woman approaching professional attire notebook in hand. I'm Sarah Chen from the Washington Post. I was hoping to get a few minutes for a follow-up interview. Jessica hesitated. She'd done dozens of interviews over the past year. Told the story so many times she could recite it in her sleep. But the publicity was important. It kept the pressure on, kept people paying attention. Of course. Jessica gestured toward a bench nearby. Emma, can you go find Mr. Frank? Tell him I'll be there soon? Okay, Mommy. Emma hugged her quickly, then ran off toward the house. Sarah sat down, recorder ready. It's been a year since Victor Chambers was arrested. How does it feel? Complicated. Jessica chose her words carefully. There's relief, obviously, satisfaction that justice was served. But there's also grief. For my grandmother, who didn't live to see this day. For all the years she spent alone carrying this burden. For the Osage families who waited generations for acknowledgement. Speaking of Chambers, Sarah said, have you heard the news? What news? He died last night. In prison. Heart attack. Jessica felt the world tilt slightly. Dead? Confirmed this morning. His lawyers are claiming inadequate medical care. There may be an investigation. Jessica sat with this information trying to process it. Victor Chambers, the man who had threatened her life, kidnapped Martha, tried to destroy everything she cared about, was dead. Gone. No more appeals, no more legal maneuvering, no more threat. She should feel something. Relief. Satisfaction. Closure. Instead, she felt hollow. Miss Morgan, are you all right? I don't know. Jessica's voice was distant. I spent a year preparing to testify at his trial, preparing to face him again. And now? Now you don't have to. Now I don't have to. They sat in silence for a moment. Does it change anything? Sarah asked gently. For you? For the case, Jessica considered the question. The civil matters are already settled. The land has been transferred. The reparations have been paid. Chambers' death doesn't change any of that. She took a breath. But personally, I don't know. I've been carrying this anger for so long, this determination to see him punished. And now that he's gone, you don't know what to do with those feelings. Exactly. Sarah closed her notebook. Off the record, my grandmother used to say that hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Maybe Chambers' death is a chance to put down that cup. Jessica looked at the young journalist, surprised by the insight. That's very wise. Like I said, my grandmother. A commotion from the house drew their attention. Raised voices, a crowd gathering. What now? Jessica stood moving quickly toward the sound. She found Frank at the center of the crowd, his face, pale phone pressed to his ear. What is it? What's wrong? Frank lowered the phone, his expression stunned. That was the tribal council. They've been contacted by a geological survey team working about 50 miles from here. And they found another deposit. Frank's voice was barely above a whisper. Uranium. Even bigger than the one here. And it's on land that was also stolen from the Osage in 1921. Jessica felt her knees go weak. Another one. It appears your grandmother wasn't the only guardian. There were others. Other families who knew. Who kept the secret. Who stood watch. Michael Whitehorse pushed through the crowd, his face a mixture of shock and something that might have been hope. This changes everything, he said. If there are more deposits, more stolen land, more evidence, more justice to pursue, Jessica finished. They looked at each other, the weight of the revelation settling over them. I'm too old for this. Frank shook his head. One fight was enough. You said that a year ago, Martha reminded him. Right before you single-handedly took down a billionaire's private army. That was different. How I was angry then. Now I'm just tired. Jessica stepped forward, touching Frank's arm. No one's asking you to fight again. You've done enough, more than enough. Frank met her eyes. But you're going to, aren't you? You're going to chase this new thing. Get involved. Risk everything again. Jessica thought about Emma, about the life they'd built here, about the peace they'd finally found. Then she thought about Eleanor. 40 years alone, standing watch, waiting for someone to finish what she started. And now there were more. More guardians, more secrets, more injustices waiting to be exposed. I don't know, she said honestly. I need to think about it. Fair enough? Michael nodded. The tribal council isn't expecting an immediate answer. This is going to take time. Research, legal preparation. But when we're ready to move forward, you'll call me. I'll call you. The crowd gradually dispersed, returning to the celebration, though the mood had shifted. The news of Chambers' death mixed with the revelation of new deposits created a strange emotional cocktail. Endings and beginnings tangled together. Jessica found Emma by the refreshment table, carefully constructing a tower of cookies. Mommy, Emma's face lit up. Look how tall I made it. Very impressive. Jessica sat down beside her daughter. Can we talk for a minute? Emma's expression immediately grew serious. She could read her mother's moods like a book. Is something wrong? Not wrong, just complicated. Jessica searched for the right words. You know how Great-Grandma Eleanor spent her whole life protecting this land? Emma nodded. Well, it turns out there might be other places like this. Other land that was stolen, other secrets that need protecting. Are you going to protect them too? The question was so direct, so simple. Jessica wished the answer could be equally straightforward. I don't know yet. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. If I did this, it would mean more work, maybe some danger. Things might get hard again. Things were hard before too. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact. When we lived in Detroit, when we didn't have food sometimes, when you cried at night because you thought I was asleep. Jessica's heart clenched. She hadn't known Emma was aware of those moments. This would be different, she said. How? Because we'd be choosing it. Before hard things happened to us, this time we'd be choosing to get involved. Emma considered this, her young face thoughtful. Great-Grandma Eleanor chose too. Right, she could have left, sold the land, but she stayed. Yes, she chose to stay, and you chose to come here, even though you didn't know what you'd find, even though it was scary. Yes, Emma nodded slowly. I think choosing hard things because they're right is different from hard things just happening to you. When you choose, you're brave. When things just happen, you're just stuck. Jessica stared at her daughter, overwhelmed by the clarity of her logic. When did you get so wise I told you? Emma grinned. I learned from you. So what do you think I should do? I think you should help, because that's who you are. You help people, even when it's scary, even when it's hard. Emma reached out and took Jessica's hand. And I'll help you, because that's who I am too. Jessica pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, tears streaming down her face. I love you so much. I love you too, Mommy. Over Emma's shoulder, Jessica saw Frank watching them from across the room. He raised an eyebrow, a question. Jessica nodded slightly. Frank sighed, but there was a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He turned to Martha, said something that made her laugh and shake her head. Then he pulled out his phone and started making calls. The fight wasn't over. Maybe it would never be over, but Jessica had learned something important over the past year. You don't fight alone. You fight with family. 3 months later, Jessica stood in a different courthouse in a different state, presenting evidence to a different judge. The case was bigger this time, more complex, more dangerous. The corporations involved made Southwest Resource look like a corner store. The politicians protecting them reached into the highest levels of government. But the evidence was solid. Eleanor's meticulous records had led to other records, other guardians, other secrets preserved across generations. A network of ordinary people who had dedicated their lives to protecting the truth, waiting for the moment when the world was finally ready to hear it. That moment had come. Miss Morgan, the judge peered at her over his glasses. Do you understand the implications of what you're alleging, yes, Your Honor? Jessica's voice was steady. I'm alleging that over a century of American mineral wealth has been built on systematic theft from indigenous peoples, that companies and governments have conspired to cover up these crimes, and that the evidence to prove it has been hidden in plain sight, guarded by people like my grandmother who knew the truth and refused to let it die. These are extraordinary claims. They are. And I have extraordinary evidence to support them. The judge leaned back in his chair, studying her. You understand that pursuing this case will make you enemies. Powerful enemies. People who will stop at nothing to silence you. I've already faced those enemies, Your Honor. Jessica thought of Chambers, of Jenkins, of the abandoned industrial site where she'd almost died. They failed. And if new ones emerge, then I'll face them too. The courtroom was silent. Finally, the judge nodded. Very well, Miss Morgan. Present your evidence. And she did. The trial lasted 8 months. 8 months of testimony. 8 months of documents and recordings and witnesses who had been waiting decades to tell their stories. 8 months of legal maneuvering by corporations desperate to bury the truth again. But truth, Jessica had learned, was stubborn. Once it started coming out, it was very hard to push back down. On the day of the verdict, Jessica sat in the courtroom with Emma on one side and Frank on the other. Michael Whitehorse sat behind them, surrounded by representatives from a dozen tribes who had joined the case. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have your honor. The foreperson stood, paper trembling slightly in her hands. In the matter of the Osage Nation versus the United States Department of the Interior and affiliated corporations, we find in favor of the plaintiffs. The courtroom erupted. Jessica sat frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. They had won. After everything, after all the years of waiting and fighting and sacrifice, they had won. We find that the defendants engaged in a systematic pattern of fraud, theft, and conspiracy to deprive Indigenous peoples of their rightful mineral wealth. We award damages in the amount of... The foreperson paused as if she couldn't quite believe what she was about to say. $17.3 billion. The room exploded again. Emma threw her arms around Jessica's neck. Mommy, we did it. We actually did it. Jessica hugged her daughter, tight tears streaming down her face, unable to speak. Around them, people were cheering, crying, embracing. Decades of pain and injustice finally acknowledged. Finally addressed. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough to truly compensate for what had been lost. But it was a start. It was justice. Frank leaned over, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Eleanor would be proud, he said gruffly. Damn proud. I hope so. Jessica wiped her face. I really hope so. Michael Whitehorse made his way to their row, grabbing Jessica's hands. You did this, he said. You and Eleanor. Without your family's evidence, without your courage, none of this would have happened. It wasn't just us. It was everyone. All the guardians. All the people who kept the faith when it would have been easier to give up. Michael nodded, understanding. The tribal council wants to honor you. A ceremony next month. Will you come? Jessica looked at Emma, who was bouncing with excitement. Wouldn't miss it. The ceremony was held on a perfect Oklahoma evening, the sky painted in shades of gold and crimson. Jessica stood before the assembled tribal leaders, humbled and overwhelmed. Eleanor Morgan stood alone for 40 years, Michael said, addressing the crowd. She could have walked away at any time. Could have chosen comfort over conscience. Instead, she chose to guard the truth, knowing she might never see justice in her lifetime. He turned to Jessica. Her granddaughter came to us with nothing but courage and determination. She faced threats, violence, powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to silence her, and she never wavered, never compromised, never gave up. Michael lifted a beaded medallion, intricate and beautiful. On behalf of the Osage Nation, I present this honor to Jessica Morgan and her daughter Emma. From this day forward, you are part of our family. Your ancestors' sacrifice will never be forgotten, and their legacy will live on through you. Jessica accepted the medallion with trembling hands. I don't have the words, she said softly. When I drove up to that farmhouse a year and a half ago, I thought I'd lost everything. I thought the world had beaten me. I thought there was nothing left to hope for. She looked at Emma, at Frank, and Martha, at Michael, and the tribal leaders at the community that had embraced them. I was wrong. I found more than I ever imagined. A purpose. A family. A reason to keep fighting. She held up the medallion. My grandmother guarded this land alone for 40 years. But I've learned that no one has to stand alone. We're stronger together, we're braver together, and together we can fix anything. The crowd erupted in applause. Emma squeezed her mother's hand. I told you, she whispered. I told you we could fix it. Yes, baby. Jessica pulled her daughter close. You told me. That night after the ceremony, after the celebrations, after the guests had gone home, Jessica stood alone on the porch of the farmhouse. The memorial center was quiet now. The lights dimmed, the building settled into peaceful silence. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, more cases to pursue, more injustices to address. But tonight she allowed herself to simply be. The Oklahoma wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and earth. Stars blazed overhead more than she'd ever seen in Detroit, a reminder of how vast the universe was and how small human struggles could seem in comparison. And yet those small struggles mattered. Every fight, every stand, every choice to do the right thing, even when it was hard. Eleanor Morgan had understood that, had lived it for 40 years. Now Jessica understood it too. Grandma, she said softly, speaking to the wind, to the stars, to whatever remained of Eleanor in this place she had loved and protected for so long. I hope I made you proud. I hope I finished what you started, and I hope wherever you are, you finally found peace." The wind picked up slightly, rustling through her hair like gentle fingers. Jessica smiled. "Good night, Grandma. Rest now. I'll take it from here." She went inside, closing the door softly behind her. In the bedroom, Emma was already asleep, mere buttons tucked under her arm, her face peaceful in the moonlight. Jessica climbed into bed beside her daughter, pulling her close. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fights, new opportunities to make a difference, but tonight there was only this: a mother and daughter safe and warm in a house that had been filled with secrets and sorrow, but was now filled with hope and love. "We did it," Jessica whispered against Emma's hair. "We really did it." And as sleep finally claimed her, Jessica Morgan smiled. Because broken things could be mended. Because justice delayed was not justice denied. Because one woman with nothing but courage and determination could change the world. And because her daughter had been right all along. They could fix it. They could fix anything. Together.